The Tainted Sword is a 1992 novel by D.J. Heinrich, which is actually a nom de plume for Dory Jean Watry, though supposedly she's not actually the author of the last book in this trilogy, though that name is still used for whoever did write that one. This is book one of the Penhaligon trilogy, which is a Dungeons & Dragons series in the Mystara setting, though the label on the book is just, the old basic Dungeons & Dragons logo from the 90s. This is the default setting for basic Dungeons & Dragons, which is not really a thing anymore. And there are not really many novels in this setting, actually, so this is a first for me. And this was the first actually published for the setting. In particular, it is in the Penhaligon region of Karamikos and starts in the small town of Bywater. Flynn is being mocked by a mob of children. They call him a fool, and though he was once labeled mighty, Fane Flynn is old and was once a knight before falling from grace 7 years prior. We meet him astride a griffin and under the scrutiny of Johanna Menhir, who is 19 years of age and from the city of Specularum. She's traveling north for knighthood from Baroness Arteris Penhaligon, but she has no one to speak for her, and on her behalf has been orphaned for more than a decade. There is also Wormblight, a sword once of great renown, now lies tarnished and forgotten, and kind of like Flynn, this was once his sword, but he may be the only one who can use it, and he may have to, as the malevolent dragon Verdalith is causing problems. The problem is he doesn't actually have the sword. In Chapter 1, we get a sense of Mystara's religions. There are beings called immortals that are worshipped. And Joe mentions praying to Odin, for example, and these immortals are pretty much epic-level characters from what I can tell, and Odin being kind of an ancestor god fits in, I think. Also, in the first chapter, someone gets punched in the testicles, which was surprising, made me laugh out loud, but I don't know if that's what the author was going for. But besides that, Joe and Flynn, we have two other characters that get some spotlight. Dane is a boy that lives alone in the woods, and we have Braddock the dwarf. But while the blurb mentions them, Dan hardly has much page time, and Braddock doesn't even show up for most of the book. It's really about Flynn and Joe. That and the sword, which must first be reclaimed and then lose its taint. Hence the name of the book. But we also get some of the book from Sir Brisbois, or Brisbois, which sounds really lame if you use French pronunciation. We get some stuff from his point of view, though he's not a good guy, and so in this type of tale, he's clearly an antagonist. Though we learn of Maldrake, another not-so-good guy, and some past misdeeds pertaining to Flynn. Also, some of the perspective of Yvonne, the ex-wife of Flynn, and her parts are uneasy and make me worry about her and a wizard named Terrell. These characters really take their part in the castle that is kind of the focus for this quest. And while the initial image of Flynn isn't of an aging man, he seems like he's older than we get. We actually find out he's the ancient age of 37. The plot itself is a bit weak. It's kind of like a movie, of getting the old hermit out of his shell and then some training and then an intro quest. But it's not the most gripping start, and there's much more telling and showing. Not always a bad thing, and I just didn't feel like it helped here. Oh, and the names are kind of on the nose and give big hints about the mysteries in the novel. But it did manage to surprise me with the ending. Left me wondering where book 2 would start and then go to. It works by itself, I feel like, rather well, but will probably feel unsatisfying to end here for most, so just because of the ending that I shame to talk about. There are still some plot threads unrealized as well by the end. There's also some romance in here that I'd argue is questionable. I will say that this is mostly an age gap thing. It's an okay book, though. I feel like most would probably find it mediocre, which is pretty typical for D&D novels. I did learn, actually, shortly after finishing it, oddly enough, that the cover was actually where Brandon Sanderson got the first idea for Shard Blades, which is that cover you can see on there now. Very unwieldy sword. But of course, that is the famous Wormblight. So anyways, Lean from Loon's Lyceum, interesting read. I don't know if I'll read more in this setting, but it's an interesting thing to finally read in this setting, and an interesting way to end it, I think, for a first book. Anyways, I'll catch you next time.